Hi everyone, this is Hero from the Birds back with another Shadowlands video. In this video I'm going to look at the 9.2 changes coming for Holy Paladin, specifically the tier sets that have been announced. I'm going to talk about legendary combinations and the gameplay style that I think is going to be prevalent and is going to be used most often for cutting edge raiding and also just for our regular raiding. So my focus is on raiding today, and I want to begin by showing you what each of the sets is offering Holy Paladins. On the 2 set side, we get a buff to Word of Glory every 30 seconds, which grants us our next Light of Dawn to cast 2 times, which is pretty relevant, and do more healing. So essentially, over a 1 minute period, it's plus 2 Light of Dawns, and the 4 Light of Dawns that are affected by this little buff are going to hit that much harder. Second part, the 4 set, Light of Dawn has a 100% chance to reduce the CD of Avenging Wrath by 2 seconds per target it's hit. Now, I'm pretty sure this also includes things that are overhealed. So in a raid setting, when you're hitting 5 targets with Light of Dawn, you're going to reduce it by 10 seconds. That means every 6 casts of Light of Dawn is 1 minute taken off the CD of Avenging Wrath. And this is what makes, I think, in my opinion, this 2 set and 4 set combination perhaps one of the strongest across all of the specs that they released 2 sets and 4 sets for. I think Holy Paladin probably is going to be completely busted next year. The reason being, we basically have access to full uptime on Avenging Wrath without really any need to game the system or do anything substantial to make it happen. As long as you get your 4 set, you can be any covenant, and you'll still likely have a very good chance of reducing the CD of Avenging Wrath down to the right amount. But this also includes talent usage that we're tending to use, Divine Purpose and Awakening on the throughput side for just constant Avenging Wrath procs. Put these 2 things together, DP and Awakening, with this 4 set, and you're guaranteed to have pretty much full uptime on Avenging Wrath. Why is that significant? There's 2 reasons, actually. On the damage side, it's significant because Avenging Wrath offers Holy Paladins 30% bonus to their damage in addition to the healing it offers. But that damage clause is really relevant for what Holy Paladins tend to be brought for in a raid setting. And we'll talk about how this is relevant for legendaries in a second, but I just want to focus on that element. The passive damage for any of the covenants of Holy Paladin really leverages this 30% bonus heavily. Your Crusader Strikes, your Judgment casts, and especially your Hammer of Wrath casts all get boosted by being in Wings. And another element that's fascinating on the damage side is Wings enables Hammer of Wrath. So it allows us to operate as if we are in an execute window. If you have the entire fight as an execute window, it means your Hammer of Wrath uptime will basically be close to 100%. So every 6 seconds, you have the opportunity to cast it. Hammer of Wrath is amazing for a number of reasons. One, it builds holy power from ranged. So it's not like Crusader Strike in that you have to be in melee. You can be moving away from a boss doing a mechanic and fire off a Hammer of Wrath to build holy power. Amazing. Second, it does a ton of damage. Not just because we have wings, but it's just a hard-hitting spell for the coefficient. And then obviously the third thing is with Avenging Wrath up, we get bonus damage and bonus crit. So both of those working together to amplify it. This is outside of the fact that in our legendary opportunities, we can take a couple of things to make Hammer of Wrath even better. Some legendaries that give us 2 charges, so it kind of gives us a little more bang for our buck in a window. Mad Paragon, which is a commonly used legendary even now to punch out damage in all of the ret specs, or excuse me, all of the paladin specs, whether it's ret, prot, or holy. Mad Paragon is an exceptional adding into our damage. I'll just show you it here so we can get it up in front of the screen. Having 30% extra damage on Hammer of Wrath and having access to Hammer of Wrath every time we want it, essentially 100% of the time, is really substantial as far as the damage side of the throughput for Holy Paladins. But also, Hammer of Wrath is going to extend Avenging Wrath. So not only is our 4-piece well suited to Holy Paladin because Avenging Wrath offers us access to Hammer of Wrath, but this legendary is going to allow us to push that window open all the time to get us 100% uptime fairly easily. We put this together with the fact that we can play Venthyr, and with the new double legendaries, we have access to Radiant Embers, which it's sometimes a little bit tricky to use, but I'm fairly certain that especially the cutting edge guilds will find it very easy to make use of Radiant Embers. Even though Blizzard has tried to nerf the damage side of Venthyr's Ashen Hallow, it's still going to be exceptionally strong, even if all it did was enable higher damage for Hammer of Wrath. But notice, Hallow's duration is increased by 50%, so we are going to have more damage just from Ashen Hallow itself. Not only that, Ashen Hallow gives us access to Hammer of Wrath, so and it increases the damage of Hammer of Wrath. So it's really, really strong for a class like Holy Paladin that needs to build and spend in order to do its job. If the primary spender you want to use, Hammer of Wrath, is such an exceptional spell, both for, the primary builder you want to use, Hammer of Wrath, is such an exceptional spell, doing a ton of damage. Really, really solid stuff. So, I can see at the moment, the go-to build's probably going to be Venthyr, Holy Paladins with Mad Paragon, and this 4-piece is just going to enable them to make use of many, many uses of Divine Purpose and Awakening procs to keep Wings uptime going all the time. And all you'll be doing is casting Judgment, Hammer of Wrath, Crusader Strike, and then you'll probably play something like Glimmer, or I guess Beacon of Faith is probably fine as well. This first row, you can even try to squeeze out more Holy Shocks if you wanted. Completely fine. Doesn't really matter, to be honest, because you'll have uptime through the wazoo of Wings, which is going to make you really, really powerful. So if you want a damage-oriented side, that Holy Paladin should be really strong. If you're looking at pure healing throughput, I'm going to recommend Divine Resonance Kyrian with Mykonos alongside Shock Barrier, and this is because this combination is going to give you 3 bonus Holy Shocks within the 1 minute CD. Mykonos is going to lower that, so you'll have access to Divine Toll that much more often. And every single one of those Holy Shocks is going to synergize with Shock Barrier. Just a standard throughput monster. Shields are always, always, always very good value from a healer perspective because they're completely efficient. They can wait so you can prep people by casting it, and just always good stuff. In addition to this, it's going to give us pretty good holy power generation, which will also synergize with Dawn Will Come, our 4 set, meaning that we get access to all kinds of Light of Dawn. The other consideration, and this pairs together a little bit nicely with the way the 2 set wants us to play, if we went Necrolord and we looked at playing with the Gavel, which is down here, Duty Bound Gavel, what we're looking at doing here is converting Word of Glory casts into Light of Dawn casts. That's the playstyle of Necrolord. It's probably the highest throughput potential because you get far more Awakening procs and DP procs as the Necrolord Covenant, because what Vanquisher's Hammer does is it converts each of your Word of Glory, so 2 in a row, into Light of Dawns. This also synergizes partly with the 2 set, not because we get access to more than the +2 Light of Dawns, but because we are going to be naturally casting Word of Glories due to Gavel, so it fits a little easier within that style. If you're playing as Venthyr, you have to just kind of track in your mind when you're going to get access to the 30-second CD on Dawn Will Come. Cast a Word of Glory so that your next Light of Dawn will burst twice for more healing. Whereas in Necrolord, you're naturally going to be proccing that all the time because the Duty Bound Gavel is a 30-second CD, so it's going to give you that opportunity either way. But that doesn't mean that Venthyr is going to struggle. It's just another thing to keep track of, because most of the time in a raid, we're just going to be casting Light of Dawn back to back to back. Finally, I think there is some reason to make use of Divine Resonance for those of you who really like Inflorescence's gameplay style. That's the casting Holy Light build. So you're preferring not to build with Crusader Strike, but you'd like to cast Holy Lights and then fill things in. This is probably going to scale okay, the Holy Light will, over the course of the expansion, just due to the way secondary stats work. But the thing I've noticed, and the scaling isn't really going to push it, in my opinion, past the Shock Barrier style, but one thing that you can do is fill with Infusion of the Light procs on your tank targets, your beacon targets. And this will allow you basically, given the way the rotation works, of casting 2 Holy Lights into your beacon target, casting a Light of Dawn to spend your Holy Power, and then casting a Holy Shock to get the Infusion of Light proc. That cycle generates quite a lot of Holy Power, and it will synergize fairly well with Dawn Will Come as far as bringing the CD back, always being in wings, and that sort of thing. The Holy Light build with Inflorescence, when you cast it on the tank, generates a ton of healing. You can do this in any of the Covenants, but I think for those of you who prefer to do Holy Light stuff with Paladin for some reason, seems like it'll be very viable, and it'll fit right in with the 2-piece and the 4-piece sets. People will probably yell at you like, what are you doing? You should be playing, Venthyr with Mad Paragon because it does a crap load of damage, and maybe they're right, but nevertheless, this option is still here for you. Why not Marauds, and why not Shadowbreaker? Seems like this should be, clearly Shadowbreaker should be the go-to here, right? And I just want to clear a few things up. First of all, I don't think people understand what Shadowbreaker actually does. I think there's a lot of confusion on this. There's no direct synergy between our 2-set, our 4-set, the double legendaries that we have access to, and Shadowbreaker in general. Because what Shadowbreaker is really doing is giving you a little bit more efficiency on your Word of Glory casts, which in a raid are suboptimal compared to Light of Dawn. And it's making your mastery far more efficient. So if you have a lot of mastery, Shadowbreaker's fine as a legendary in general. There's nothing wrong with it. But it doesn't get substantially better because we have access to this kind of a 4-set. We're still going to cast the same number of Light of Dawns. And they will, with Shadowbreaker, generally speaking, do a little bit more healing because the range at which the game will look for injured targets increases when you have Shadowbreaker. So if I'm standing here, I'm out of range of these guys here with my Light of Dawn. With Shadowbreaker, they would be basically within range and would take full advantage of the 36% mastery that I have here. But most of the gameplay that a Holy Paladin engages in is melee healing, because you are going to be building with Crusader Strike, and even if you're doing a Holy Light build, you're targeted as a melee, or you're tagged as a melee character. So you want to be in melee in order to essentially take advantage of the fact that a mechanic directed at melee might hit you. And if you're standing in ranged and they get a melee mechanic, it's kind of awkward. So most of the healing you're going to do is going to hit 2 tanks, yourself, and a couple of melee if you have them in your raid. You should usually have a lot more range in your raid in general. But turning around to blast the ranged group with a Light of Dawn, the swivel, 360 firing is fine, but it doesn't really improve substantially the kind of throughput we're looking at, because most of the targets we're going to hit, even if you're stacked all together, are going to be right there close to you in mastery range anyways. So don't be fooled about the nature of Shadowbreaker. If you cannot reach targets, if they're way across the room, then Shadowbreaker increases in its value because it allows you to be more efficient. But there's nothing particularly about this that makes it synergize in an extra special way compared to some of the others. Whereas Mad Paragon clearly helps us to stay within our Avenging Wrath window because we are getting access to more Avenging Wraths, lowering the CD. So our Awakening is going to proc, and then we throw a hammer and extend it by a second. So our Awakening procs will last a couple more seconds than they normally would. And that gives us time to continually reduce the CD of Avenging Wrath and get it back naturally. So Mad Paragon is always going to be helping and synergizing with our 4-set, whereas Shadowbreaker is just kind of a little bit of gravy on top. Marauds. Why not Marauds? Well, my one thought here is I think Marauds is probably fine, but there's a bit of a GCD cramp for Holy Paladins who are using Marauds because you want to press Light of the Martyr after every single Light of Dawn to use up that proc. And one thing that the 2-piece is going to do is it's going to push us a little bit towards spending, in a 30-second window, spending one of our Holy Power spenders on a Word of Glory in order to amplify the next 2 Light of Dawns. That puts a bit of a cramp on the way that Marauds is going to work. So we have to do more tracking and remember, oh, okay, we have the buff, cast a Word of Glory, but that spender of a Word of Glory immediately makes us have to wait on casting another Marauds. And I think that's going to push it out of favor. It doesn't mean it's bad, but what I mean is there are more efficient ways to make use of the Dawn Will Come 2-set and 4-set. Necrolord has the easiest time because it's pretty smooth. You're going to be casting Word of Glories anyways. Dawn, and then I think in Venthyr is going to want to match up with Mad Paragon anyways, just because the doubling down on the damage amplifier is worth it. So, if nothing else changes, and they just release the game as it is today with these tier sets, with these legendary effects, with the damage profile, and no modifications to Venthyr or anybody else, the throughput side seems to me pretty clearly to be Shock Barrier plus Kyrian Divine Resonance. The damage throughput side, Radiant Embers alongside Mad Paragon. And those are pretty 2 simple ways to look at how Holy Paladin is likely to play out in 9.2 based on the tier set that we have released, which, as I mentioned before, guys, if it comes out like this, you can expect to have Avenging Wrath up 100% of the time. And unless they nerf Holy Paladins in some way, it's going to be the most sought after healer for cutting edge rating. Because, look at guys, Paladins can afford to do less healing in general because of Devo Aura and because they have passive damage. So these 2 changes, especially the 4-set, essentially doubling down on how often we have access to Avenging Wrath, makes us the kings on both the passive damage side and also on the throughput side because we have wings all the time. I hope that helps to give you a sense of what you can look forward to. If you have questions, I will take them in the comments. Otherwise, enjoy, and I will be looking at all of the specs and the tier sets that are significant for them and what kinds of gameplay I think you can expect for 9.2. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you guys again next time.